Good morning. Welcome to the Business of Preschool. My name is Victor Mraz. I'm the board chair here at the Early Learning Coalition of Southwest Florida. If you'd all please join us and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you to the Bumblebees class at the Messings Children's Center for leading our pledge. All right, thank you very much for being here as we highlight the importance of early learning. On behalf of our board of directors, I'd like to extend a hearty welcome to the members of our business community, educators from the local school districts, and all of you who have come together this morning as supporters of early learning. This, of course, includes those who provide direct services to young children. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to acknowledge the Early Learning Coalition Board of Directors. Board members, please stand. Thank you all for your work in support of the coalition. And the staff that was able to attend today as well for their work behind the scenes today's event. I'd like to also extend a thank you to the county commissioners from Collier, Hendry, Glades, and Lee counties for proclaiming today Provider Appreciation Day. Those proclamations are displayed as you enter the theater. And being as it is Provider Appreciation Day, we had some breaking news last night regarding one of our providers. The Guadalupe Center down in Immokalee received their accreditation finally from the National Association for Education of Young Children. Congratulations. Renata, Bob, Dawn, if you wouldn't mind, please stand so we can recognize you. Thank you also to Broadway Palms Theater for donating their space for the program today. We are enjoying breakfast this morning, which I understand will be remaining out until around 8 o'clock. Coffee will be available till the end of the program. And finally, thank you to Dr. Martin for speaking this morning. And to you all, thank you and enjoy today's program.
So I hope I don't blind you with the glare coming off of my head, but it'll wake, I know, many of you up. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Well, let's get a little more enthusiasm. This is a wonderful subject we're going to talk about today. So good morning, everyone. How you all doing? Good. I'm Marshall Bauer. I am proud to say I'm the vice chair of the Early Learning Coalition Board. Say that 3 times early in the morning. Susan sent me, this is Susan who I'm going to introduce in a second, but she sent me, I think, not once, not twice, 3 times a script, and then brought me up here this morning and went through the script. And many of you who know me know I don't do script very well. She's already going, you're way off script already. But the first thing I get to do is introduce you to Susan Block. I don't know if all of you have had the opportunity to meet her, but I tell you, do that. Please take the opportunity to meet her. She is the CEO at the Early Learning Coalition. She has a lot of wisdom to offer here in Southwest Florida. She brought it from upstate New York. So from upstate New York to Southwest Florida, many people have had the opportunity to work with this woman who is so committed to the topic that we're here to talk about. So please help me in welcoming Susan Block.
Thank you, Marshall. No, I didn't think I was going to rein you in. Why are we here this morning? Most often when we think about children in preschool, we don't necessarily stop and say, this is the start of a lifetime of success. But in fact, that's really what it is. Because when children are in a high-quality early learning program and they enter kindergarten, as a result of it, they enter kindergarten ready to learn, they are then far more likely to reach grade level reading at 3rd grade. And that's an important marker in time because that's also an indicator of the potential for them to graduate from high school. And as you all know, everything as an adult starts with at least a high school degree, whether you're going to technical school or you're going into the military, you're going to college, or you're going into the workforce. You need the skills that you've learned in high school as a basis. And then you can go and hopefully be a self-sustaining, contributing member of society. That all starts at preschool.
I think that's me again.
That's you.
So I get the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker this morning, but before I say some things about him, I want to say some things about this general topic. Many of you are business people in this room, and that's really who we are targeting this morning. Many of you are educators in this room, and that's really who we're targeting this morning. Many of you are community members, and that's who we're targeting this morning, because the business of early learning is everybody's business. And I know that a lot of you in this room, it's like preaching to the choir, but for those of you in this room, especially the business partners that are here, we are going to make you ambassadors this morning for early learning. And we're going to give you some suggestions on how to take this out into the community. This is our board's first attempt at opening up the dialogue on this level. We want this to become a community-wide conversation. I know that the educators in this room who work with K through 12, and we're blessed to have many of our Lee County School Board members here. Do we have any of the outer counties, I shouldn't call them that, other counties from the school board here, or superintendents and administrators? Would you guys all stand up from Lee County all over Southwest Florida so everybody can applaud you? Because you're going to get what comes next after early learning, after pre-K. And every kindergarten teacher that I've ever spoken to, and believe it or not, I've talked to a lot of them over the last 12 or 13 years, tell me how much better off everyone in that classroom is if everyone is prepared and ready to learn because they've already been doing it. So with that, it is now my opportunity to introduce to you our keynote speaker this morning. When the committee that was putting this together, we were talking about who could we get to come up here and talk about this, his name came to the top very quickly. He has been in Southwest Florida for a very short period of time, but he's already left a huge footprint here, and it's a very good footprint. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and his background, because I really want you to hear it. Because he tells me, you know, people ask me to speak about things of which I know nothing, and then he gets up and he just flabbergasts everybody because he knows so much about it. Truly, I'll tell you this real quickly. When he moved here, I think it was his first week, I met with him in his conference room at FGCU, and I've been here for over 30 years. He was telling me things about Southwest Florida that I didn't know. I said, you really turned the table on this whole thing. So Michael Martin, and that's what he prefers to be called. He doesn't like PhD after his name wherever he goes, and he doesn't like doctor, because he's one of those truly genuine people who does what he does because he loves it. So Michael Martin serves as president of Florida Gulf Coast University. The Florida Gulf Coast University Board of Trustees unanimously selected Dr. Martin to become the institution's fourth president on July 1st, 2017, and his appointment was confirmed by the Board of Governors. President Martin came to FGCU from the Colorado State University system, where he served most recently as Chancellor Emeritus and Senior Fellow, following 3 years as Chancellor. Prior to this, he was Chancellor of Louisiana State University, President of Mexico State University, Vice President for Agricultural and Natural Resources at University of Florida. He couldn't keep a job. Vice President for Agricultural Policy policy at the University of Minnesota and served 15 years on the faculty, including a term as faculty senate president at Oregon State University. He's a native of Crosby, Minnesota. He earned a bachelor's degree in business and economics and a master's degree in economics at Mankato State College, which is now Minnesota State University. He received his PhD in applied economics from the University of Minnesota in 1900. His areas of specialization are prices, international trade, public policy, transportation, and business logistics. His membership on local, state, and national boards and organizations spans decades of service and includes the Farm Foundation of Trustees and the International Agricultural Trade Research Consortium. Dr. Martin and his wife Jan are parents of 2 children adopted from Korea. Amanda graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in graphic design. She and her husband Paul are parents to 2 terrific grandsons, Logan and Charlie. Son Sam has a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Minnesota, a master's degree in human genetics from Sarah Lawrence University, and a master's degree in software engineering from Pace University. I will add this to it too. I am so proud to call him friend. He is truly a gentleman by every stretch of the imagination and a scholar. Help me in welcoming Dr. Mike Martin.
That's an exhausting introduction, and it wears me out. And it does sound like I can't hold a job, though I will note Marshall and I share several passions and realities, not the least of which, and I aim this at you, Cole Peacock, we have low-maintenance haircuts. You think about the amount of time we're working while you're combing your hair, and the public is doing just fine investing us, but I had to pick on somebody out there.
It looks good on you. You wear it well.
Thank you. I always go in and say, give me the peacock haircut, and I never can get it. I must confess that this is a little daunting because this feels a little like, as you might say, hauling oranges to Florida. I'm here with a group of people who know a good deal more about this topic than I do. But what I hope I bring to you is a commitment as a colleague to be a participant as we continue to work together on early childhood education. And a passion for that for a number of reasons. Marshall introduced a number of folks in the room who are leaders in education across the spectrum, and I thank you all as a member of your community of educators for what you do. I am going to take the moment and shout out Greg Atkins, a colleague that I've come to appreciate a great deal, and I want to tell you, from where I get to sit, he's a remarkably good colleague in terms of understanding the relationship between K through 12 and a university, and I will be a cheerleader for him at any turn. So just to let that be known. And then when we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, I hadn't thought about saying this, but I do say it every once in a while. I think it's important that from time to time, when we do the Pledge of Allegiance, we all stop and think about what we just pledged to, right? I mean, there really is something in this. First of all, we are a republic. And if you know what that means, and I think you all do, that's a representative form of democracy that actually requires at least 2 political parties. And we ought to respect 2 political parties in the process of maintaining a republic. That we ought to be one nation, indivisible. And I don't think there's anything more important in terms of liberty and justice for all than giving every child a jump start on life. So when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, it's embedded in there, to me at least, a commitment that we all have to be committed to those values. So I was delighted to see the little kids do it, but I also think all of us who are adults ought to, from time to time, stop and ask ourselves, when we're pledging, what are we really pledging to do? And I think the pledge is worth remembering for that reason. Let me start this way. As I suggested, I've spent much of my career prior to crossing over to the dark side and becoming an administrator, teaching economics and thinking about economics. And in some respects, that's a pretty boring way to live your life, but it still is who I am. And so I'm going to start by, if you don't mind, just refreshing your memory maybe and a little bit of my foundation in economics. because I think it relates to the topic of the day. The first economics book, as we know it, was written in 1776 by Adam Smith. It was entitled An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And Smith was a moral philosopher and the first economist who wanted to think about what made nations successful economically. That was 243 years ago. And since that time, economists, myself included, well down the food chain of great economists, have been thinking about that. What is it that differentiates one economy from another? David Ricardo in 1817 argued that it was a differential endowment of resources, that resource endowments made a difference, and he wrote on a thing called comparative advantage and why Britain developed this way and Portugal and Spain developed a different way. And it was an interesting, and a lot of us cite that. More recently, two famous economists, and I will be a name dropper here, one of whom I got to know when he was still alive, won the Nobel Prize for thinking very seriously about that. The first was T.W. Schultz, Theodore W. Schultz, who I got to know, won the prize in 1979. And followed with that, Gary S. Becker also thought about the same topic and won the Nobel Prize in 1992 for economics. And they both won the prize for coming to understand and make the case that the way nations become successful economically is by investing in human resources. More fundamentally, that those countries, those nations that were willing to take the time, energy, and political cost of investing in education tended consistently to do better long-term than the others. Schultz studied all of the countries coming out of World War II and asked the question, why did these recover and others did not? And so one of the reasons I've spent my career interested in economics and particularly interested in education is because of the impact that I had that was made upon me in getting to know T.W. Schultz just a little bit. One of his star students named Vernon Rattan was a wonderful colleague and friend of mine. Vernon died a few years ago and plugged me into this as a much lower level, less talented economist, but one equally interested. Now, Schultz didn't speak specifically to pre-K, but he did speak about the full bandwidth of investment in human resources through education throughout the life cycle of the individual and the perpetual life cycles of nation. And I've come to believe that Schultz and Becker, among many others, were right. And now we have seen in the research that it's been established that they were unquestionably right. If, and you all know this, but I'm going to recite a little of it, the studies that have been done over time, starting probably the most famous is the Tulsa, Oklahoma study, the longitudinal study of the impact of pre-K on students, on people through their lives, was found to be profound, significant, and universally positive. Not just in their educational attainment, but the evidence from several other studies, including in Chicago, in Boston, in Georgia, the Upjohn study, all showed that the investment in pre-K may be the fundamentally most important educational investment any society can make. Because not only does it put every child on a different launching pad, for education, there's evidence that it reduces crime, it reduces drug abuse, it reduces all the social negativity that comes from people who have not had the chance for full self-actualization and a chance not just to have a great job and a career, but to come to know more about themselves in the process. So the evidence that has come out of research fully affirms what Schultz and what Becker and even back to Adam Smith were thinking about when they began asking what makes countries successful. So if you just take the macro argument as members of society, and if those of us we old guys like me, want to pass on a society better than we inherited it, then one of the things we must advocate for, in my judgment, whatever position you have, wherever you are, but particularly those of us in higher education, need to think seriously about that reality, about how we can make investments now that we know will pay off. It may not be immediately, but 15, 20, 25, 40 years out, and therefore build a bigger future society, which I think is the definition of civilization. I think a civilized society is one that cares about the next generation, even if the next generation hasn't done anything for me. So that's also part of, I hope, our ethic. But there's also some much more fundamental reasons. And as I say, when you do the Pledge of Allegiance, I think justice, liberty, and justice in particular is embedded in what we do for the youngest among us to give them the best chance. And let me turn to a little personal observation. I only have 2 data points, as Marshall suggested. I have 2 grandkids. One is 7 and one is 4.5. Logan's 7 and Charlie is 4.5. And because their grandparents, in this case my wife and I, are modestly prosperous, we've been able to fund a fairly high-end pre-K, preschool experience for each of them. And as I say, I only have these 2 data points, but they remind me every day that I talk to them. When I was FaceTiming with them last night, I actually don't know how to FaceTime. They get me. It's really interesting. My phone goes off and there's a 4.5-year-old explaining to me, push the button, Papa, I'm over here. Seriously, last night I came home and Charlie was on giving me some information. But what I've discovered in interacting with them is the things they're capable of learning and appreciating and finding fascinating because they are in an environment that stimulates learning at such an early age. I was telling somebody, we don't want to get too far off the script here, but Charlie was telling me he's 4.5 and he goes to a very, very nice preschool. His older brother came out of preschool already able to read before he got to kindergarten, and he's a little math whiz. We do math all the time. I took him to a hockey game in Minnesota this winter when I was back there, and I used the entire hockey game to do math questions. You know, if there's been 37 shots on goal and they've scored 2, how many did he stop? And his little brain was working the whole time while he was eating about 8 pounds of peanuts, most of which were in the hair of the woman sitting in front of us. So he's not a great peanut eater yet, but he was a good mathematician. And the other night I was talking to Charlie and I told him, we're coming to Minnesota to see you in a couple weeks. And he said, well, you don't have to worry about this, Papa. There's no hot lava in Minnesota. It's all in Hawaii. And then, and then he says, but we do get potatoes here. And I said, what do you mean? And his mom came in and said, he means tornadoes. He didn't get that quite right. But what it struck me about is how many 4.5-year-olds can carry on a conversation about hot lava in Hawaii. And it's a sign to me that the capacity of these little people to learn, not just to learn, but to be curious, to be confident, to be articulate at that age is remarkable. And every kid ought to have what Charlie and Logan's grandparents can provide. And I think it's unjust in some respects that we can afford to do it and others cannot. So I have become an outspoken, unambiguous, to some people I suspect annoying advocate for universal pre-K. I belong to a group of about 420 university presidents that's just an alliance that periodically publishes something we can all sign on to about education. And I'm advocating for that group to collectively take a strong position on universal pre-K. Because I believe that the president who gets the pleasure and honor of sitting in the chair at a place like FGCU 20 years from now, or 15 years from now, will see the enormous benefits of those of us who can advocate for that now. So now the question is, how do we do it? Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you my particular opinion. And you know, right now, the great debate over the next president's heating up on both sides of the party line. And I've heard a number of candidates argue for fully paid college. I would argue back to them, no, fully paid pre-K. If you're going to invest in something, I would much rather believe we're better off. And for one thing, I don't believe college ought to be free. I think it should be attainable and affordable, but I think anyone who wants a college education ought to have a little sweat equity in the deal. And I don't think you can expect sweat equity out of 4-year-olds, but you can expect it out of 18-year-olds. So my view is that's the wrong end to start with. If we want to advocate for something, now I realize that 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds don't get to vote, so it's not as politically popular. But I believe, first of all, it's got to be done at the federal level. I believe it's got to be a federal commitment that in one way or another, every child will have the opportunity for a quality pre-K experience. Because you should not be penalized because you may live in a state where the citizens, for whatever set of reasons, do not want to make that kind of investment. You should not be penalized by the accident of where you were born. So first of all, I think it's got to be a federal issue. I do believe it's affordable. If nothing else, just build one less aircraft carrier and put that money into the number of children you could invest in. So I believe, first of all, it should be federally done. It should be funded at a sufficiently high level that every child gets something close to the best we can deliver. I believe that those of us across the spectrum of education who have had the opportunity to observe that impact have to be outspoken advocates collectively to get it done. And I will, some of you folks in this room who know me better than others know that the great thing about being late in your career, knowing that no one will offer you another job, is you can say whatever the hell you want. And as I've said to our board on more than one occasion, the worst you can do to me is make me full-time grandpa again, because I'm pretty good at it. At least my grandsons think so. My daughter's not always so happy with the way we behave. But as you know, grandpa can do any damn thing he wants. We go to Dairy Queen before dinner. So I could go back to doing that. But while I have the platform, while I have the opportunity, while I have the chance to be invited to speak with folks like you or anyone else, I'm going to continue to say what I truly believe, and I truly believe this. So from here on out, what I intend to do, and I've been doing it already, but I'd like to commit to being more vociferous in my relationship with politicians and others, is to continually make the case that of all of the things a nation can do to understand the causes and nature of the wealth of nations, investing in our children is by far the highest payoff. All of the data suggests that. All of the data suggests that the costs, the benefits so exceed the cost that it is truly a no-brainer. And we need now to step up and find a way to get it done. And I think as an economist we can make the case, and I think as a nation it's particularly important because, again, if you look at the data, we are falling behind a number of other countries in making these kinds of investments, particularly Northern European countries. And so if this country wants to remain a primary player on the international economic stage, we need to think about more than just Defense Department investments. We need to think about more than just technology. We need to think about the most fundamental investment we ever make, returning to T.W. Schultz, Gary S. Becker, and all the others in human resources at the youngest possible age. So I leave you with, at least from where I've got to sit for the last 48 years in public higher education, absolutely convinced that the students that we see coming in the door are unambiguously impacted if they get a jump start early, not just for academic reasons, but for social reasons, for maturity reasons, and we ought to take that seriously. So I want to thank you for giving me a chance to give you my sermonette, and also thank you for all of you to be committed for something that I deeply believe in. And I intend to be your advocate and cheerleader any way I can. But congratulations for good work, and go Eagles.
Wow.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Michael, I don't want to call him doctor, as it was said, but my name is Joe Paterno, and I've been a member of the board since 1999, so I guess I'm with the elder statements of the board. I see some hands waving at me, so. But Mr. Martin, we want you to know that from the coalition standpoint, we'll be behind you in that advocacy to make sure that early education is funded totally, and I agree with you, it starts at the federal level. We're here today to celebrate, to announce our champion for early learning. When the board considered who it should be, only one name came to the top. There's one individual here who's just been so proactive in trying to support, promote early education of all of our young people. He's demonstrated dedication to serving the young children. The choice for this award was easy for us. Jerry Poppy, who is a CFO at Waterman Broadcasting. He's a CFO for Waterman Broadcasting here in Fort Myers, where he has led strategic and day-to-day operations for over 31 years. Jerry graciously volunteers his time, most often in leadership roles. He's been on our board, the Executive Committee of United Way, Lee County for 18 years. He's a member of the board of the Rotary Club of Fort Myers South. He received the Large Club President of the Year district for District 6960. Is that correct? He served on the Early Learning Coalition for over 10 years. He was our treasurer, our president, and if you visit our office in Fort Myers, you will see that there's a Poppy Playground for his dedication to the Literacy Buddy program that we have. And I would encourage you, I know he was going to probably say it, but if you're not a Literacy Buddy, where we provide books to 4-year-olds 3 times a year, you should become a Literacy Buddy. Because you get a letter from the student. They don't write very well when we first get the letter. It's done by the teachers, but as the young men and women, or the young children, begin to read those books, share the books at home, share the books at school, by the second and third time you get a letter, they're able to almost print their names. It is amazing. So I would encourage you all, and this is in honor of Jerry. His wife Becky is 41 years. He and his wife Becky of 41 years have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. It says we're delighted that it was supposed to be a surprise, but she's here, but she's sitting next to him, so it's not much of a surprise. So please welcome Jerry, but it's my honor and pleasure to be able to present to him the champion for early learning for this year. Jerry. We do have a little award for you, buddy. You got the podium. I'll get out of your way. She wants a picture.
She wants a picture of us.
Don't put that on TV.
Well, thank you. It is an honor to be recognized, to be the champion, and my 2-hour speech, has been covered very eloquently by, Susan and Dr. Michael Martin. So I might be able to get you guys out of here early. But in researching Mr. Martin, I discovered a couple of things about him. Number one, he's a fellow Minnesotan. Number 2, he and I share the same alma mater. And number 3, he had some of the professors that I also had. So it's kind of neat to have a little bit of reminiscing time early this morning regarding that. One of the things that Dr. Martin, I'm going to refer to him that now, he has on FGCU website his 6 tenets of leadership. And I want to dwell just a brief moment on his first one, and that is excellence is a journey, not a destination. I believe that early childhood education, the journey, should be as rich as we can possibly make it. As I look today at the attendees, I see individuals in the front lines creating new excellent journeys for our children in child care centers. I see business leaders who are supporting the cause of early learning. I see a variety of staff who have believed and continue to believe in early childhood education and daily are placing children first. I see volunteers helping with the creation of these next journeys. I see individuals individuals who believe that tomorrow's successes start with the journey today. Several years ago, the Early Learning Coalition of Southwest Florida created the Literacy Buddy program that Joe was referring to. It was a simple concept. We would ask individuals to become a literacy buddy to a 4-year-old child in one of our childhood centers and make a commitment that throughout the year, the curriculum year, they would purchase 3 books and send a child a letter with each book. In exchange, the child would send their literacy buddy a letter, generally starting, as Joe had indicated, with some stick figure drawings. That's all good, to advise us as to what their interests would be and to take that on to our next book that we would send them. During the year, with each successive letter, the literacy buddy would see the progression from scribbles on the first letter to the forming of actual words at the end of the year. It is an awesome program that literally places books in the hands of children who may not otherwise receive that type of enrichment. Early childhood education, as Dr. Martin has indicated, has proven that small child has a much greater capacity to learn at an earlier age than what we had previously been led to believe. The opportunity presented to all of us today is to start that educational journey for our children earlier and make it the best that it can be. What opportunities exist today? Each and every one of you can become a literacy buddy. Doesn't take a lot. And you would be helping to enrich the life of a child. Your company can follow in the footsteps of our friends at Edison National Bank or Chico's, Campo Felice, Northern Trust of Naples, First Presbyterian Church, Sistas, the Faith Center, and Worthington Country Club. These entities stepped up and became literacy buddies for an entire classroom in one of our facilities. If you do not feel that you can become a literacy buddy, you can communicate with our state legislators about the need for more funding for early childhood education. We emphasize the need for quality education to be offered in our child care facilities, yet the wages the centers can afford results in turnover at a much higher level. As Dr. Martin had indicated, we need to be able to provide a foundation in our child care centers that helps children prosper and to be able to envision a future for them that will help them with greater capacity. We offer quality education to the training to the staff, and upon certification, they become more qualified to seek employment elsewhere where there's a big disparity in wages. It's not right that we should have low-paid people working with the most opportune time to help children learn. The churn of staff in child care facilities is not healthy for our students or our children. Every parent and grandparent wants their child to have a quality preschool experience, yet the gap between the haves and have-not is spreading rapidly. We need more champions today that will join us in supporting children in preschool, building upon the foundation of learning through enrichment and quality programs, leading us to a more productive future. Some numbers for you. I'm a numbers guy. As Joe had indicated, I've got 31 years of accounting here at Waterman Broadcasting. But just for reference, in 2015, there were 10,700 children born within Collier, Glades, Hendry, and Lee counties. Today, in 2019, some 4 years later, those newborn children are effectively in the state of Florida's VPK preschool program. Within the Early Learning Coalition of Southwest Florida, the coalition, through the child care facilities, are serving 63% of them in centers, or nearly 6,800 children. Last year, the Literacy Buddy program supplied only 1,260 children with 3 books. The Literacy Buddy program was able to reach roughly 12% of the targeted age group. What about those other 88%? Various research has categorized that 1 in 5 children nationally live in poverty. Using that as a point of reference, we are looking at over 2,000 of those children born in 2015 who are probably now classified in the have-nots. We need more buddies to have a bigger impact to enable us to continue to enrich these children on their educational journey. You may ask, how important is a book to a 4-year-old? Earlier, when we had the Pledge of Allegiance, the Messina Center was up there with the children. One of my literacy buddies was at the Messina Center, and I decided that I was going to take my book over there and hand deliver it. Much to my surprise, I was invited into the classroom and immediately was swarmed by 4-year-olds. Once they found out I was a literacy buddy, they all started telling me about their books. Following that brief meet and greet, it was that during their lunch hour, it was time for the kids to take their nap. One of the little buddies that was there went over to his cubby, took out his book, and proceeded to take it to his cot. The teacher said that that was his security blanket, that he took it to his nap with him daily. She told me of another little boy that would not take his books home because he was fearful that they would be damaged or stolen. For a child at 4 years old to value a book to that extent tells you something about children. It's hard to look at the disparity between haves and have-nots. What used to be a small chasm is now the Grand Canyon. You know, as Dr. Martin was indicating, his grandchildren know how to use a cell phone, how to call him. There are children that have not had that enrichment or that experience. When I look out into Glades and Hendry County and I think about the little children out there that are of the have-nots and their ability to be enriched, it takes you and I to make that difference. We cannot do it alone. We need to go to the state legislature and ask for more funding for early childhood education. Put the dollars where they're going to make an impact first. We can't continue to expect to do the same things with different results. We need to start moving the pendulum the opposite direction. You know, my wife is a teacher. She's been a teacher in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. I've heard the message. And the real impact, you know, as indicated, is that a child, by the time they're in 3rd grade, you can pretty much predict the course they're going to take. Isn't it better if we start moving back into the 3, 4, and 5-year-old category to start helping those children on a path of enrichment so that they aren't cast into a have-not and a won't make it or will be struggling by the time they get into the higher grades and decide to leave school? It's our choice. We can make a difference. And I would like to say that the haves are far outpacing the have-nots, and it's time we make a change. I'm a big advocate of the Literacy Buddy. I would encourage all of you to be engaged. A big thanks to those individual companies who have stepped up and have really grabbed the opportunity to enrich the lives of children, and I encourage you all to do the same. Thank you.
See, look, she turned the page on the script for me. So I hope you all could see and hear and actually feel why this gentleman was a no-brainer for the board to vote for this prestigious award. Give Jerry Poppy another big round of applause. And I also hope you see the brilliance of why we asked Mike Martin to be the speaker up here, really drawing the link between what we're trying to do. Thank you, Mike. So I just want to offer just a couple of thoughts. Number one, for those of you that don't know me, I had a prior life, and I was a prosecutor for 18 years. And I'm going to tell you this universal truth. We can continue to spend tons of money to build juvenile detention facilities, to build jails and to build prisons, and I'm going to tell you right now the cost far exceeds the investment that we can make in our children, beginning with early learning. It makes a huge difference. The reason I got involved in all of this, I'm kind of a data-driven guy too, Mike, and when I was prosecuting the most heinous of crimes across Southwest Florida in the five-county area here, I learned one thing: education makes a huge difference. It's the great equalizer that Jerry was talking about. It's the best prevention and intervention tool going. You guys as business leaders, you people out there that are our elected officials, I know you already know this, the people that are here that are from the community, most especially you that are where the rubber meets the road, the ones that are working with our youngest citizens, thank you for what you're doing. But please don't leave it here this morning. Take it out there. Become the advocates for early learning. Makes them ready for K through 12. And we have an obligation to our youngest citizens to do that. So, you heard Dr. Martin, I'm back on script, about how early learning provides an essential foundation for young children to become contributing members of our community who boost our economy. And who greater than an economist than Dr. Martin to tell us that. And you've heard from our champion about how individuals can make a difference in the lives of our children by inspiring a lifetime love for learning. We'd like you to know that there are many different ways that you can help. The Early Learning Coalition has 2 board seats available. That means you have to work with me, but I'm told hazard duty pay is tax deductible. Somebody told me that this morning. The people that work with you, Dr. Martin, told me that actually. That will be, so the Early Learning Board has 2 seats currently vacant that will be appointed by the governor. Interested? Go to the Early Learning Coalition's website for the application online. Locally, business can support their employees by creating family-friendly practices. Flex time to allow families to participate in school activities with their children. Consider opening an on-site child care program for your employees. If you're too small to do that, create a consortium of small businesses to open a program. There are so many more things, and Susan's going to be the expert that's going to come talk to you now.
Thank you, Marshall. And how about it, Marshall and the Events Committee? Nice job this morning. Thank you. As you came in this morning, you received packets, and there's information about our coalition, lots of data, lots of points about what it is that we do in the community. And of course, we've featured our Literacy Buddy program because it's one of the ways that people really connect with the Early Learning Coalition, which otherwise is behind the scenes supporting providers who are doing direct services for children through the voluntary pre-kindergarten program and through our child care subsidy program called School Readiness. So if you're interested in being a Literacy Buddy, there's a bookmark in there. You hop on our website. It's very easy. We are recruiting buddies for next year. It's a blast. It's a blast. You'll have your letters up in your office too. both of our speakers, all of our speakers this morning have spoken about the need to connect in Tallahassee. As we walk the halls up in Tallahassee, we find that the legislators are very agreeable. They understand what it is that early learning means to our education system. But we haven't quite made the leap from we understand it to we legislate support for it. We have some good starting places. Last year, there was legislation written that helps us to quantify what a quality early learning program looks like for those children who are getting child care subsidy. This was a really important step in the right direction. This year, we thought we were going to see another bill that would put similar qualifications on our VPK programs. Fell a little bit short, so there's room to advocate for that next year. It's important that the experience not just be a free experience, that children have the opportunity, but it is that high-quality experience that's going to make a difference in the long term. We need your help. We need your voice. We need ambassadors. So if you have any thoughts about joining us to carry that message, please reach out to us. I'm happy to sit down and talk with you and walk with you into those legislator offices. But when they see me coming, they know what I'm there for, right? But when they see our business people in the community saying, hey, I have a hard time keeping employees because the child care is uncertain in our community. We don't have sufficient child care. We don't have a quality child care. That starts to resonate. In about 20 years, oh, I'm on your script now.
You know I'm not going to read. You can do. Oh well. So, just to add a couple of things before I say the final thing, I want to point out that our K through 12 partners that are here. I know you guys already know this because you were smart enough, Dr. Atkins and school board members, to write it right into your strategic plan about support for early learning and pre-K. And I know that that's done throughout the rest of Southwest Florida. So, you know, that linkage between pre-K and K through 12 and then higher education has to be a seamless, smooth one if we're going to be turning out our next productive citizens who are going to be, by the way, be making the decisions about whether or not our environment stays pristine here in Southwest Florida, about whether or not many of us who are getting ready to retire have Social Security at some point in our lives, about whether or not health insurance is available to everyone. So consider that. This is truly an economic issue and a community issue at the very bottom of what we need to be doing in terms of growing up productive citizens. So I leave you with that. In about 20 years, today's preschoolers will be tomorrow's decision makers. Let's make sure they have the best possible education as youngsters. We know that this early investment will build a strong economy and a better Southwest Florida community. Thank you all for coming out. God bless you and have a great weekend.